Hello, this is Dread from Epoch Builds, and in today's video topic, we will go over Locust Swarm cold damage over time, Apathy's Maw Swarmblade Druid. Finally, EHG has decided it's time for this skill to shine. So Locust Swarm functioned like this before this patch. You summon some locusts, and then consume them to give yourself 12 melee physical and 12 melee poison flat per locust consumed, while also giving you 12% increased area of effect per locust. This then creates an AoE around you, dealing melee damage over time, the second kind of its type in the game, the other being Aftershocks being able to deal melee damage over time. So why was it bad up until now? Well, it has a base duration of 4 seconds. If you grab the 100% duration in the tree, it goes up to 8 seconds. If you do the math, I currently have a cooldown of 4.3 seconds per summon hive, which is through a lot of heavy investment, and a max of 4 of them. This means if I use 2 hives to create locusts, you would barely have enough time with the AoE until the hives came off cooldown. This meant you never really wanted to go over 2 hives ever, and stopping every 8 seconds to get mediocre damage over time was lackluster at best. But this was changed in 8.5. So now, on top of everything else you gain from consuming locusts, we also gain 12% duration per locust consumed. This means if I have an average of 24 locusts, which is my current max with 4 of them, that is up to 288% increased duration. So in simple terms, if we consume all of our locusts at once, we go up from 4 seconds duration to 16 seconds of duration, literally quadrupling it just by simply consuming locusts, while also removing the need to utilize the cooldown nodes or having to swap into werebear form for extra duration. Since my hives have a cooldown of 4.3 seconds and I have a 16-second duration, it means that we can just reset our locust swarm every 16 seconds instead of 4 seconds, which helps our quality of life immensely. And we also have more single target because we get to consume 4 hives at once all the time instead of just 2. We then grab the node that converts all of the damage we have from Locust Swarm into cold damage. This includes the added damage per locust and the flat damage on our weapon. This means we can use whatever weapon we want as long as it has a hefty amount of flat damage. This means we can utilize an Apathy's Maw. Apathy's Maw gives us up to 220 flat cold damage, some leech rate, some melee percentage damage, and of course the kicker, Doom. Doom deals a void damage over time, stacks up to 4 times, and makes enemies take 4% increased melee damage taken per stack. This applies to our Locust Swarm because it is a melee attack even though it's damage over time. Then we get some extra effect from Apathy's itself, leading to 24% increased melee damage taken for enemies, making Apathy's Maw the best in slot weapon for this build in the game. It's also easily farmable to have LP, and adding a simple increased damage over time roll, or of course flat damage, it just feels great. And you can use whatever flat damage you want because of course it gets all converted to cold damage. The main reason this all functions so well is because since Locust Swarm is a melee attack, it works with melee damage leech, which Primalist has a lot of. Just melee damage leeches life from the bottom half of the Beastmaster tree, it means you are leeching from your damage over time all the time, leading to a very smooth playstyle. Another interesting way you can utilize this is there is a prefix on two-handed weapons called melee damage leeches life, and it's just generic and it's 20%. Goes all the way up to 20% at tier 5. That's 20% of the damage over time you deal per second. So getting an Apathy's Maw with that modifier could lead to some disgusting amounts of leech. All of this combined with the gigantic AoE we can achieve with the bleed consumption node inside Swarmblade giving us 5% increased area and 50% increased damage per bleed consumed on the enemy with Swarm Strike, the skill we use to proc Locust Swarms. It means we have our Thorn Totems and Locusts help apply bleeds, meaning we can get a large amount of AoE and increased damage, letting us focus on our prefixes for attunement and minion health, meaning our Locusts don't instantly die so we don't get screwed over by enemy AoEs. If you made it this far in the video, consider subscribing to the channel. It's viewers like you that keep this channel going and make some of the highest quality content for Last Epoch on YouTube possible, for free. With all that being said, let's get into the rest of the video, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build. So the general skill rotation, first off, make sure you're moving enough to summon your your vines here so that you gain rage back. And of course, summon your freaking hives, make them attack they'll attack your enemy, and then you'll apply a bunch of bleeds. And then once you get to your average, you'll consume them and then do a bunch of damage. As you can tell, that is a lot of damage for a skill that I previously thought was really bad. Now, the AoE is humongous as well. Now, that's pretty much it for that. Like, there's not really much else to that. You just, every so often, just set up your Locust, make sure you're bleeding something, and then bam. Make sure you're attacking in between because you want to keep up stacks of Impervious and Aspect of the Boar as well, because having all that free DR is nice, right? Now, there is one bug currently. Now, you are not supposed to be able to gain more than one Swarm Strike at a time. You are stuck with just one Swarm Strike at a time, right? You only get to have one. You are limited to one, or at least it's supposed to be limited to one. As you can tell here, has a base duration of 4 seconds, only one Locust Swarm can exist at once. Sadly, that's not the case. As you can tell, I'm doing 20k, 10k, 20k, do it again, 30k, 40k, 20k. You see that? That means there's multiple AoEs being put around me. Now, this build, as you can tell, does completely fine even without this, because we do plenty of damage. It doesn't really matter, like, if we have one or two or whatever, right? So the build will be completely fine once they fix that, but right now, that's why you'll see sometimes you spike up in really hard in damage. Now, for Swarmblade form here, we take 1 point into Viper's Call, because we want the Serpent Strike, right? To affect our tree, which I'll explain later. 2 points travel into Slashing Spiral for the Locust Swarm AoE. The AoE is really nice because the bigger AoE that we have with Swarm Strike, the more Locusts we can consume at once that are near us, and that means that we get, of course, more AoE and stuff. 4 points into Carnage. This will apply 60% more damage to your Locust Swarm, even though it doesn't say it, which is really strong. Then 3 points traveling to Locust Agility, 1 point in Ironclad Beetle. I have it set up so that I gain armor whenever I gain dodge. So utilizing this, we get up to like 40% dodge whenever we're running around the monoliths and stuff. And of course, as well, we have a Throne of Ambition. So this allows us to scale a bunch of armor on a boss. And of course, we have Thorn Shields for clear. 2 points travel to Grand Colony. 2 points in the Hive Mind. This makes it so that we go up to 4 hives, which is very important because that's how we deal all of our damage. And of course, the extra locust per hive is nice as well. We can get up to a respectable amount of locusts to consume. And of course, since our duration is long enough between, the cooldowns and stuff, that makes the build feel way better. Then 3 points into Bountiful Hibernecula for the increased cooldown recovery speed. That on top of the increased cooldown recovery speed on my helmet is enough to make this go all the way down to 4.3 seconds, which feels great. Then 1 point to Frostbites. This is very important because it converts all added flat from every single sword and the base damage from Locust Swarm into cold damage. So it pretty much takes all of this flat that's on this Apathies, the 115 melee Void and the 101 melee Fizz. It turns it all into cold, which makes this really strong. And then of course you gain the 12 flat you gain the 12 flat melee poison and 12 flat melee physical for the consumption, right? Well, that gets turned into cold as well, which means everything is turned into cold, which is amazing for us because we can run like cold pen and stuff like that. So this is very strong. This allows us to run any weapon we want. And like I said, I chose an Apathy's Maw. 1 point travel into Wasp Flight, 3 points travel into Death by 1,000 Winds. We have a little bit of bleed chance with our Arm Blade, and of course a little bit of bleed chance with our Locust bleed chance. This on top of a 31% chance, chance to bleed, a generic one, is enough to give our Locust enough bleed chance so that whenever we summon some Locusts here, they can apply a bunch of bleeds for us because we have Bloodless Swarm. So we gain a bunch of increased damage per bleed. This is all of our increased damage. If it wasn't for this node, this build would not function. And of course, you gain a bunch of increased area per bleed as well. So we actually get a bunch of area because of that, as you can tell. So that is very strong as well. And that's pretty much it for Swarmblade form. You want a 24? I have an Omnis. This is the only build I pretty much ever suggest running an Omnis because plus to skills is so important for, of course, Swarmblade. +2 to Swarmblade on your chest, obviously +3, +4 is amazing. Then +1 through Thorn Slinger. Now you could run a +1 to minion skill 1 or +1 to, I believe you can run a +1 to elemental skills 1, like staff, right? To get an extra point. I believe that's the case. Let me just double check here real quick. Just to make sure that I'm not being dumb here. I think that's the case. Where is it? It's like a staff and it has +1 to, oh yeah, it's this one. Here it is. So I get +1 to minion skills, right? We'll gain +1 to Swarmblade, and this works with the elemental staff as well. You could use this until you get an Apathy's Maw, by the way. And just to show you, must be wondering, Dread, is this build solo viable? Well, let me show you here. Yeah, it's fine. It gets plenty of damage for free, pretty much. The only required piece of equipment I would say to get started is a Terrace Path because we summon a bunch of like Spriggan vines and stuff like that to gain our rage. But you could just not run a Terrace for a while and just run the 5 points into Focus Wrath for reduced decay rate, then 1 point to Rancor. So whenever we're not attacking, we lose decay, and just not use dash as much in your Arm Blade Slash. And you can sustain your rage pretty much by just swapping over into human form, then swapping back. It's actually not that bad when you're like early on because you don't need to like spam your skills. But later on, you eventually want to upgrade to an Aterra's Path, which aren't that hard to find. And that's pretty much it for Swarmblade here. Then for Spriggan form, we take 1 point travel to Ironbark, 3 points into Deep Roots for the duration, 5 points into Terra's Bulwark, 3 points into Bulb Growth. All of this makes it so that whenever we get hit, we have a 15% chance to get hit with Thicket of Thorns. Well, 10%. This means whenever we gain that Thorn Shield, we boost up from like 22% armor all the way to like 60% armor or like 40%. It's very, very strong for just one stack of it, right? And for being a passive thing. And of course, we grab Gardens of Rage so that whenever we run around here, as you can tell, it will summon our little poisonous vines, which will keep our rage up when we're in Swarmblade form for us and pretty much handles the entire mechanic for us. Then we take 1 point into Hunter's Bane. The reason why we do this is eventually we want a bunch of minion bleed chance idols. I do not have them currently, but you want a bunch of generic minion bleed chance idols, and that will apply bleed to the enemy with our minions, right? And then of course we'll consume that with our Bloodless Swarm to deal a bunch of damage. So having our ranged vines help us as well, which is cool. And that's pretty much it for Spriggan form. Then for Ice Thorns, this is your stereotypical I gain armor when I'm hit thanks to Thorn Barrier. It's like pretty self-explanatory. We don't really need anything else other than this. You could technically use a Wolf Companion in this place, but I don't really care for that. So I went for Ice Thorns instead for the extra armor. Then Serpent Strike. So you grab 6 points to Primal Reflex. That's because we're converting it into armor with Locust Agility. So as you can tell here, we gain a bunch of armor. This is enough base armor to scale with our Throne of Ambition so that we can go to like 60% armor when we're attacking a boss, which makes us feel way tankier thanks to that. And of course, just as much attack speed as humanly possible. The bleed chance is really cool as well, and the ailment duration as well. So it makes our bleeds last longer so that we can stack more bleeds on a single target. So for Bloodlust Swarm. And that's pretty much it for Surf and Strike. Then for Thorn Totem, this is your stereotypical utility Thorn Totem setup. Mainly, the main reason why we like Thorn Totem is because when we proc it and we have a bunch of totems, we can get a minion bleed chance on hit idols, and then of course apply bleeds to enemies so that we can consume them for even more. So we can get an insane amount of increased damage thanks to Bloodlust Swarm that we currently don't have if I just have a bunch more mini bleed chance idols. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Thorn Totems. That's all we're using Thorn Totems. Also, as well, Chill is pretty good against stuff like the Rogue in Arena of Champions because they are really fast and they move around a bunch. So being able to chill them helps a lot. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passives here, we take 8 points in natural attunement. We want as much attunement as possible because to make sure that our locusts stay alive in the monoliths and stuff, we want base attunement, which gives them HP scaling. And we also want, of course, increased minion health. So the attunement gives our locust base HP. And then of course we increase that with increased health. So that's why we're grabbing attunement here. Also resistances are nice. Then 1 point travel into primal strength, 5 points in hunter's restoration for the increased health, 6 points into survival of the pack. This increased melee damage, increased leech does affect us, so it's just 3% damage leech. It's very strong early on because it allows us to simply sustain our our leech early on. Then 5 points in berserker for just less damage taken, and this will apply to our locust swarm if we proc it when we're at low life as well, which is really cool. Then 8 points into Earth Sign Strength for nearby enemies take less damage. Really strong because we're always nearby enemies. 1 point travel into Savagery. Six. Eventually, I want to like mess around with the tree and put 6 points into Lamprey's Teeth for the bunch of Melee Leech because the Melee Leech keeps us sustained. It's really strong with the DoT. Then 4 points travel to Boarheart. I'm thinking about putting 5 points into this so that it's up all the time instead of just some of the time. Then 3 points in the Call of the Pack travel for HP, 5 points into Porcine Constitution for increased DR, and then of course Primal Strength so that we can prac Aspect of the Boar on melee hit. And that's pretty much it for Beastmaster. For Shaman, we don't use it. Then for Druid, 3 points travel into Chitinous Plating, 5 points in the Thicket of Thorns for the chance to cast Thorn Shield on you, 7 points in the Spirit Warden. We want as much HP as humanly possible because our sustain is insane. 5 points in Primordial Resonance. We're dealing cold damage over time, so Ellie Pen is insane. And of course, we're always transformed. 7 points into Druidic Prowess for the attunement for the base HP scaling. 8 points into Piercing Gale for the Cold Pen. This applies to our AoE. It also gives our Locust movement speed and cast speed and stuff, and attack speed, meaning that they apply bleeds faster and they get to enemies faster to apply those bleeds, which is really good. Then 10 points into Harmonious Wisdom for a bunch of Crit Avoid. This is actually how we're capping our Crit Avoid is thanks to this. So yay for this node. And of course, Attunement gives our Locusts even more HP. 5 points into Impervious for DR on bosses, really strong. Then 10 points into Hide Skin for as much HP as humanly possible. And that's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing. Like I said, important gearing, Atera's Path. This makes it so that you can get your rage back up. Plus levels of Swarmblade is very important. Like I said, you could use a +2 minion skill wand for staff for a bit until you get an Apathy's Maw. Just get some like double flat on it or something. And eventually you want it like an Apathy's Maw with like melee damage leeches life, damage over time, melee flat, melee void. Doesn't matter what kind of melee flat it is as long as it's just melee flat because it all gets converted into cold. Then Omnis is really strong. This drops from Oribus. Any Oribus at 200 plus corruption. I have a few Omnises myself, and they come with a variety of different roles thanks to the resistances. So you can always farm for a better one, and they eventually drop with LP. I've seen some with LP. And then, of course, Helmet. This is not required, but it's very good because the double increased cooldown recovery speed is very strong for Summon Hives. So right now it's 4.3 seconds. If I take it off, it goes to 5.5 seconds. So of course, the DR is very strong. We very much so want it. Then for the chest, Vitality plus the Swarmblade, increased HP, movement speed base, of course. Then the rings here, minion health, attunement, LE damage over time, strength, resistance, resistance, endurance, endurance threshold, the usual. Same thing with the other side, attunement, health. You definitely probably want silver rings because being able to move fast makes the AoE feel a lot better as well. Because if we get a large AoE here, right, it feels amazing to just dart through monos, tick enemies down, and kill them. And of course, kill them while we're moving through them, which feels really, really good. So it's really good to get movement speed. Gloves, you could eventually upgrade to an LP atrophy that would give you a lot of damage that I currently don't have. But of course, you'd require a good LP atrophy to keep that, of course, keep that HP on there as well. Like I said, a Terra's path. Anything on a Terra's path, movement speed's very strong with a Terra's path. Uh, Terra's path is like some of the best boots in the game. And of course, Ochre Antler for the endurance, but like you can run resistances. It doesn't matter what you run on the relic. And of course, you want minion health. Minion health regen helps a bit in those sticky situations where your locusts are trying to die, but you don't want them to die. And of course, resistance as well. You can put attunement there as well. And that's pretty much it for the gearing. Like I said, idle, throne of ambition, armor on boss, very good. Mini bleed chance is very good. Having at least one makes it so your locusts always bleed, which is of course very strong on the single target. Then we want thorn idle with like chance to summon a thorn totem on hit, and of course increase cold damage per totem. That works for our cold damage AoE because we're cold damage. Then probably just slam some increased health idols as well. And that's pretty much it for the idols as well. And that's pretty much it for the build. So thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest day wherever you're at, and bye.